The massive dome of the Galactic Council chamber hummed with tension as Ambassador Taemin Park stood before the assembled alien representatives. His black diplomatic uniform felt heavy under the weight of 1,000 hostile stares. Around him, creatures from across the galaxy watched with anticipation, their various forms creating a nightmarish audience in the dim chamber lighting. The Vorthak Empire's Supreme Commander Velthar loomed over the central podium like a living nightmare. His scaled hide gleamed dark green under the harsh spotlights, each scale the size of a human hand. Standing nearly 12 feet tall, his reptilian head swayed slowly as he surveyed the chamber. 4 amber eyes burned with ancient hatred, and when he opened his mouth, rows of razor-sharp teeth glinted like polished daggers. "Humans," Velthar's voice boomed through the chamber's translators, the sound reverberating off the crystalline walls. "You have infested our galaxy long enough. Your pathetic colonies spread like a disease across the Outer Rim territories. No more." Taemin felt sweat beading on his forehead, but kept his expression neutral. Around the chamber, other alien species watched with barely concealed excitement. The insectoid Kithari clicked their mandibles in approval, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like broken mirrors. The gaseous Netholan beings pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that translated to cruel laughter. "You have 30 standard days," Velthar continued, his clawed hand striking the podium with a thunderous crack, "to withdraw from all contested Outer Rim territories, remove every human settlement, every mining operation, every research station, refuse and face complete annihilation. We will turn your colonies to ash and scatter your fleets across the void." The chamber erupted in approving roars, screeches, and otherworldly sounds of agreement. The Vorthak had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, their military might unquestioned. Their battle cruisers could crack planets, their soldiers were bred for war, and their technology had crushed dozens of species into extinction or slavery. Taemin bowed his head slowly, playing his role perfectly. "The Earth Federation accepts these terms. We will begin immediate withdrawal from all disputed territories." The satisfaction that rippled through the alien delegates was almost tangible. Several species had tried to resist the Vorthak over the millennia. The Cathari had fought for 50 years before surrendering. The aquatic Moldara had seen their homeworld's oceans boiled away. The crystalline Zethmar had been completely wiped out, their entire species reduced to decorative minerals in Vorthak palaces. Humanity's quick compliance was expected, even praised by some delegates as wisdom. After all, humans had only been in space for 2 centuries. They were newcomers, barely worth the Vorthak's attention except for their annoying habit of establishing colonies in resource-rich systems. "Wise choice, human," Velthar hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste. "The air. Perhaps your species will survive to serve us properly." Hours later, billions of miles away, Admiral Dongwoo Kim stood in his private quarters aboard the Earth Defense Station orbiting Luna. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see the cratered surface of humanity's ancient companion, bathed in harsh sunlight. His weathered face, marked by decades of military service, showed no emotion as he read the encrypted message that had just arrived. The message contained only a single line of text, but those 5 words would change the course of galactic history. "Project Nightfall is approved. Execute immediately." Kim had been waiting for this moment for 7 years. 7 years of careful planning, secret construction, and technological breakthroughs that would have seemed impossible to previous generations. He deleted the message and walked to his communications console. Lieutenant Hai-Wan Lee looked up from her station as the Admiral approached. The young officer had been with Kim for 3 years, and she could read the subtle changes in his expression that others missed. "Sir?" she asked quietly. "Send encrypted transmission to all fleet commanders," Kim ordered, his voice carrying a steel edge that made Lee straighten in her chair. "Authorization code Omega 77. Tell them the real war begins now." Lee's fingers flew across her console, sending the coded message through quantum-encrypted channels to human ships scattered across the galaxy. Within minutes, the signal reached its destinations. Captain Jin-Ho Yoon received the message aboard, his heavy cruiser defiant while patrolling the Kepler system. He read the brief transmission twice, then smiled grimly. "Finally," he muttered, turning to his crew. "All hands, prepare for dimensional phase transition. This is not a drill." On the other side of human space, Captain Seok Jin Choi, aboard the Resolute, was conducting what appeared to be a routine supply run. When the message arrived, he immediately changed course toward a set of coordinates that didn't exist on any official star charts. Captain Soo Jin Nam, commanding the stealth frigate Shadow, was already deep in enemy territory when the signal reached her. She had been watching Vorthak fleet movements for weeks, gathering intelligence that would soon prove invaluable. Across human space, dozens of ships began powering down their conventional fusion drives. In their place, they activated systems that had been hidden behind false bulkheads and disguised as ordinary ship components. These weren't the plasma drives and fusion reactors that other species recognized. These were dimensional phase drives, capable of folding space-time itself. The technology had been developed in absolute secrecy, hidden even from most of Earth's government. Only a handful of scientists, led by the brilliant Dr. Hai-Jin Song, understood the true nature of what humanity had accomplished. While other species had perfected three-dimensional warfare, humans had learned to fight in dimensions that their enemies couldn't even perceive. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the alien delegates were already planning the division of human territories. The Vorthak would claim the resource-rich worlds, while smaller species would receive the scraps. It was a familiar pattern, repeated countless times throughout galactic history. None of them suspected that humanity's apparent surrender was merely the opening move in a game played by rules they couldn't comprehend. The humans weren't retreating in defeat. They were positioning themselves for a war that would redefine the very nature of combat in the galaxy. As the council session ended and delegates dispersed to their respective ships, Ambassador Tai Min Park allowed himself a small smile. The performance had been perfect. The galaxy's most powerful species believed they had just witnessed humanity's submission. They would learn soon enough how wrong they were. 3 weeks into the withdrawal, the vast emptiness of space around the outer rim colonies buzzed with activity that no one could see. Human evacuation fleets moved through the darkness, their hull lights dimmed to avoid detection. But they weren't alone. Scanner operator Kyung-min Oh hunched over his console aboard the Earth vessel. Horizon, his eyes straining against the green glow of the sensor displays. The young technician had been tracking movement patterns for hours, watching as blips appeared and disappeared on the edge of their detection range. "Sir," he called out, his voice tight with tension, "we're picking up Vorthak pursuit ships closing on our position. 3 heavy cruisers bearing 27 Mark IV. They're moving fast." Captain Woo-Jin Park stood behind him, studying the tactical display with experienced eyes. The veteran officer had fought in the border wars against the Cathari pirates, but this was different. This was the moment everything would change. "Distance?" Park asked calmly. 40,000 kilometers and closing. "They'll be in weapons range in 6 minutes, Kyung-min replied, sweat beading on his forehead. "Sir, those are Dreadnought-class cruisers. Each one carries enough firepower to level a small moon." Around the bridge, the crew tensed. They had all heard stories about Vorthak warships. The alien vessels were built like floating fortresses, their hulls thick enough to withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. Their plasma cannons could melt through asteroid fields, and their missile systems could track targets across entire star systems. Park smiled grimly, his weathered face showing no fear. "Activate the dimensional phase drive." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's systems. Engineering officer Yong-Soo Lee's hands flew across his control panel, initializing systems that had never been used in combat before. Deep in the ship's core, exotic matter reactors came online, generating energy patterns that existed outside normal physics. "Phase drive online, Captain," Jung-Soo reported. "All systems showing green." "Execute phase transition," Park ordered. The horizon began to shimmer like a mirage in desert heat. Its solid hull became translucent, then transparent, then seemed to fold in on itself. The ship's outline wavered and twisted as it slipped between the layers of reality, moving from normal space into dimensions that had no names. On the Vorthak, pursuit ships, sensor operators stared at their displays in confusion. One moment they were tracking a large human vessel. The next, their screens showed nothing but empty space and distant stars. "Target has vanished," reported the lead Vorthak. "Ship's scanner. No energy signature, no debris field, no trace of their passage." Commander Vextar, a seasoned Vorthak warrior with battle scars covering his scaled hide, growled in frustration. "Impossible. Ships don't simply disappear. Run a full spectrum analysis." But their sensors found nothing. The horizon hadn't been destroyed, hadn't jumped to hyperspace, hadn't activated any known cloaking technology. It had simply ceased to exist in any way they could measure. Similar disappearances were occurring across the frontier. Commander Hyojung Kim stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching through the main view screen as her entire battle group prepared for phase transition. 27 ships, from massive carriers to small frigates, hung in formation around her flagship. "All ships report ready for dimensional phase," her communications officer announced. "Execute," Kim ordered. One by one, the human ships began to fade from normal space. The process was beautiful and terrifying to watch. Each vessel seemed to dissolve into streams of light that twisted and folded before vanishing completely. Within minutes, an entire battle group had become ghosts in the space between dimensions. From her command chair, Kim watched the readings on her dimensional display. The technology was so new that most of the crew didn't fully understand how it worked. They only knew that it allowed them to exist in a realm where the laws of physics bent in impossible ways. "Phase transition complete," reported her science officer. "We're now operating in folded space-time dimension level 4.7. "Excellent," Kim said. "Begin reconnaissance sweep of Vorthak positions. They can't see us, but we can see them. Hundreds of light years away, on the Vorthak command ship, Destroyer of Worlds." Grand Admiral Crexton paced the bridge like a caged predator. The massive alien stood over 8 feet tall, his muscular frame covered in battle armor that had been forged from the metals of conquered worlds. His 4 eyes burned with rage as report after report flooded in. "Another human convoy has vanished from the Rigel sector," his intelligence officer reported, his voice trembling. 12 ships gone without a trace. The evacuation fleet from Alpha Centauri has also disappeared," added another officer. "Our patrol ships found the system completely empty." Crexton's clawed fist slammed into the command console, leaving deep gouges in the reinforced metal. "Ships don't simply vanish," he roared, his voice echoing through the bridge. "Find me these humans. I want every sensor array in the fleet scanning for them." But the humans were already gone, existing in a realm the Vorthak couldn't perceive or understand. Aboard the research vessel, Valiant, Chief Engineer Min-Ho Seo monitored the dimensional engines with fascination and pride. The technology represented decades of secret research, building on theories that most alien species had dismissed as impossible. "Look at these readings," he said to his assistant, pointing at the energy patterns flowing across his screens. "We're existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Space itself is bending around our hull." Through the ship's dimensional viewer, he could see normal space stretched and twisted like a funhouse mirror. The stars appeared as elongated streaks of light, and the fabric of reality rippled like water around their passage. Captain Yonwoo Han joined him at the engineering station, studying the displays with wonder. "Are we completely invisible to their sensors?" "More than invisible," Min-Ho explained. "We're existing in folded space-time. Their sensors are looking for us in 3-dimensional space, but we're operating in dimensions they can't even detect. It's like they're trying to find a shadow by looking at the ground instead of the object casting it." The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, a species had developed technology that allowed them to step outside the normal rules of warfare. While other civilizations had spent millennia perfecting weapons and shields, humanity had learned to fight from dimensions that their enemies couldn't perceive. On Vorthak ships throughout the sector, frustrated commanders ordered their crews to scan empty space over and over again. They knew the humans were out there somewhere, but their most advanced sensors detected nothing. It was as if the entire human fleet had simply ceased to exist. But the humans were very much there, watching and waiting in the spaces between dimensions. They had become phantoms, able to observe their enemies while remaining completely undetected. The real war was about to begin, and the Vorthak had no idea what they were truly facing. The age of three-dimensional warfare was ending, and humanity held the key to the future. The Vorthak invasion began 3 days ahead of schedule, their war machine grinding into motion like some ancient beast awakening from slumber. Across the Outer Rim territories, massive alien fleets materialized from hyperspace with thunderous flashes of displaced energy. Their ships stretched for kilometers, bristling with weapons that could crack moons and reduce planets to molten slag. Grand Admiral Crexton stood on the bridge of his flagship, World Breaker, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. His invasion force numbered over 1,500 ships, the largest military operation in Vorthak history. Each vessel carried thousands of soldiers bred for conquest, weapons designed to crush resistance, and the absolute certainty that victory was inevitable. "Report," he commanded, his 4 amber eyes scanning the holographic displays that showed his fleet spreading across human space like a plague. "7th Fleet has secured the mining station Gamma 4, reported his tactical officer, a younger Vorthak with fresh battle scars. "No resistance encountered. The facility was completely abandoned." "Same with the research outpost at Delta 7, added another officer. "The humans evacuated everything. Even the emergency supplies are gone." Crexton's massive claws tapped against the command console. This was exactly what he had expected. Humans were cowards, running at the first sign of real opposition. System after system fell to his forces without a single shot being fired. Colonial settlements that had taken decades to build stood empty. Their inhabitants fled like scared children. "Where are they?" Crexton demanded, his voice echoing through the bridge. 15 billion humans don't just vanish into the void. Find me their evacuation fleets." But his forces found nothing. Every human settlement, mining operation, and research station had been abandoned so completely that it seemed like the entire species had simply decided to stop existing. The Vorthak war machine rolled forward, claiming empty victories over ghost towns and silent space stations. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came 2 weeks into the invasion. Supply. Convoy Beta 9 was traveling through the Kepler Nebula, carrying ammunition and provisions to the advancing fleets. The convoy consisted of 12 massive cargo haulers, each one heavily shielded and escorted by 4 destroyers. When the convoy arrived at its destination, the escort ships found something impossible. All 12 cargo ships were present and accounted for, their hulls intact and their crews alive and well, but every single cargo hold was completely empty. "I don't understand, sir," reported the convoy commander, his scaled face showing genuine confusion. "We left port with full loads. The manifest shows 40,000 tons of supplies per ship. But there's nothing here, not even dust." The crews couldn't explain what had happened. They remembered the journey clearly up to a certain point, then nothing until they arrived at their destination. Medical scans showed no signs of alien influence or drug use. The ship's security cameras had recorded nothing unusual. It was as if the cargo had simply ceased to exist. Similar reports began flooding in from across the invasion zone. Communication. Relays went dark without warning, their equipment intact but somehow rendered useless. Patrol ships reported brief sensor contacts that vanished before they could investigate. Supply lines that had worked perfectly for centuries began failing in ways that made no sense. Captain Yun-Young Cho watched it all unfold from the bridge of her vessel, Wraith, a ship that existed in the spaces between normal reality. Through her dimensional viewer, she could see the Vorthak supply convoy moving through what they thought was empty space, completely unaware that they were being stalked by predators they couldn't perceive. "Target their cargo holds," she ordered, her tactical officer. "We take their supplies and leave them wondering how it happened." The Wraith began its approach, sliding through folded dimensions like a shark moving through dark water. The Vorthak ships passed less than a kilometer away, their sensors detecting nothing but empty space and distant stars. They had no idea that death was watching them from dimensions they couldn't imagine. Partial phase transition in 3, 2, 1. "Mark," announced the ship's dimensional engineer. The Wraith shimmered into partial existence, becoming solid. enough to interact with normal matter while remaining invisible to conventional sensors. Boarding pods launched from concealed bays, their hulls designed to phase in and out of reality at will. Sergeant Tae-Hyung Lim led the boarding party as they materialized inside the Vorthak cargo ship's main hold. The veteran soldier had trained for this moment for years, learning to fight in environments where the normal rules of physics bent and twisted like broken glass. "Move fast and quiet," he whispered to his team through their phase-shifted communication system. "We're ghosts until the job is done." The human soldiers worked with practiced efficiency, using dimensional technology to simply phase the cargo out of normal space and into their own storage dimensions. Entire containers of weapons and supplies vanished as if they had never existed. The Vorthak crew, just meters away behind sealed bulkheads, detected nothing unusual. Within minutes, the cargo hold was empty. The boarding party vanished back into folded space, leaving no trace of their presence, except for the missing supplies that the Vorthak wouldn't discover for hours. Meanwhile, in a hidden facility buried deep within an asteroid field, Dr. Hee-jin Song monitored the operations through quantum-encrypted channels. The brilliant physicist had spent her entire career pushing the boundaries of dimensional theory, and now her work was being put to the ultimate test. The Vorthak are three-dimensional thinkers, she explained to her research staff as they watched the tactical displays. Their entire understanding of warfare is based on what they can see, touch, and shoot at. They can't conceive of threats existing in folded space-time. Her assistant, Dr. Sung-Woo Park, studied the energy readings from the field operations. "It's like they're trying to fight an enemy that exists in a completely different reality." "Exactly," Song replied. "While they've spent millennia perfecting conventional weapons and tactics, we've learned to step outside the game entirely. We're not just invisible to them. We're operating by rules they don't even know exist." The proof of her words came when Vorthak Third Fleet, consisting of over 200 ships, received orders to investigate a series of gravitational anomalies in the Outer Veil sector. The anomalies appeared on their sensors as simple distortions in spacetime, the kind of natural phenomena that occurred near black holes or neutron stars. Admiral Vexmore led the investigation personally, taking his entire fleet into what appeared to be empty space. His ships detected the gravitational distortions clearly, but their sensors showed nothing that could be causing them. "Deploy probe ships," he ordered. "I want to know what's creating these readings." The probe ships moved forward, their advanced sensors scanning every frequency known to Vorthak science. They found energy patterns that seemed to shift and dance just beyond the edge of detection, gravitational fields that folded back on themselves in impossible ways. Then, without warning, the probes simply vanished. Not destroyed, not disabled. They ceased to exist on any sensor array in the fleet. "Where did they go?" Vexmore demanded. Before anyone could answer, the space around the fleet began to ripple like water. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as something vast moved through dimensions that the Vorthak couldn't perceive. One by one, ships began disappearing from the fleet formation, not destroyed by weapons fire, not torn apart by explosions. They simply faded from existence as if they had never been there at all. Within an hour, the entire Third Fleet had vanished into the spaces between dimensions, their crews taken, prisoner by enemies they never saw. Back on his flagship, Crexton received the reports with growing horror. An entire fleet, gone without a trace. No distress signals, no debris fields, no indication of what had happened to them. For the first time in his long military career, the Grand Admiral felt fear. They weren't fighting a retreating enemy. They were being hunted by ghosts that could strike from nowhere and vanish without a trace. The humans hadn't fled in terror. They had evolved beyond the Vorthak's ability to fight them. The invasion was no longer a conquest. It had become a nightmare. The Vorthak invasion began 3 days ahead of schedule, catching even their own intelligence officers by surprise. Grand Admiral Crexton had grown impatient with waiting, his warrior instincts demanding immediate action. Across the Outer Rim territories, the darkness of space suddenly blazed with the arrival of the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. 1,500 warships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like predatory beasts under the light of distant stars. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destructive engineering, bristling with plasma cannons that could melt asteroids and torpedo tubes loaded with planet killers. The flagship World Breaker led the armada, its massive bulk stretching over 3 kilometers from bow to stern. "Begin the cleansing," Crexton commanded from his bridge, his 4 amber eyes reflecting the tactical displays that showed human space spread out before them like a feast waiting to be devoured. The first wave struck. The agricultural colonies of the Kepler system. Vorthak dropships descended through the atmosphere like falling meteors, their hulls glowing red-hot from atmospheric entry. Thousands of alien soldiers poured onto the surface, their scaled hides protected by combat armor forged from the metals of conquered worlds. But they found nothing. The colonial settlements stood empty, their buildings intact but completely abandoned. Farmhouses that should have sheltered human families contained only dust and silence. Massive grain silos stood full of crops, but no people remained to harvest them. It was as if the entire population had simply evaporated into thin air. "Report," Crexton demanded as similar findings came in from across the invasion front. "Mining Station Gamma 4 is secured, sir," reported his tactical officer, a young Vorthak warrior eager to prove himself in battle. "But the facility is completely abandoned. All the heavy machinery is still operational, but no human workers anywhere." "Same with Research Outpost Delta 7, added another officer. "The laboratories are filled with equipment worth millions of credits, but every human scientist has vanished." System after system fell to the Vorthak advance without a single shot being fired. Colonial worlds that had taken decades to establish were claimed in hours, their empty cities standing like monuments to cowardice. The alien soldiers had prepared for brutal urban warfare, expecting desperate resistance from cornered humans. Instead, they found ghost towns that echoed with their own footsteps. "Where are they?" Crexton demanded, his massive claws scraping against the metal of his command console. 15 billion humans don't just disappear. Find me their evacuation fleets." His intelligence officers worked frantically, scanning every frequency and analyzing every piece of data they could gather. But the humans seemed to have vanished more completely than any species in galactic history. There were no energy signatures from fleeing ships, no distress signals from overcrowded evacuation vessels, no refugee camps hidden in asteroid fields. The first hint that something was terribly wrong came during the 3rd week of the invasion. Supply Convoy Beta 9 was making its routine run through the Proxima Nebula, carrying enough ammunition and provisions to keep an entire battle group operational for months. The convoy consisted of 12 massive cargo haulers, each one the size of a small city, and protected by a full squadron of destroyer escorts. Captain Velnot commanded the lead escort ship, a veteran officer who had overseen hundreds of similar supply runs during previous campaigns. His sensors showed the nebula as a swirling cloud of gas and cosmic dust, beautiful but harmless. The convoy moved through the stellar phenomenon at standard velocity, their navigation computers calculating the most efficient route to their destination. When they emerged from hyperspace at the rendezvous point, something impossible awaited them. All 12 cargo ships were present and accounted for, their hulls intact and showing no signs of damage. The escort vessels had maintained perfect formation throughout the journey, but when the receiving fleet began loading operations, they discovered that every single cargo hold was completely empty. "I don't understand this," reported the convoy commander, his scaled face showing genuine bewilderment. "We departed with full manifests, 40,000 tons of supplies per ship. The cargo bay doors haven't been opened. The security seals are intact, but there's nothing inside." The crews couldn't explain what had happened. They remembered the journey clearly up to entering the nebula, then experienced a strange gap in their memories until they arrived at the destination. Medical scans revealed no traces of mind-altering substances or alien influence. The ship's internal security cameras showed normal operations throughout the voyage. It was as if the cargo had been erased from existence itself. Similar incidents began occurring across the entire invasion zone. Communication relays that had functioned perfectly for centuries suddenly went dark, their equipment intact but somehow rendered useless. Patrol ships reported brief sensor contacts that vanished the moment they tried to investigate. Supply lines that formed the backbone of Vorthak military operations began failing in ways that their best engineers couldn't explain. Captain Yun Young Cho watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of her ship, Wraith, a vessel that existed in the spaces between normal reality. Her dimensional viewer showed the Vorthak supply convoy moving through what they believed was empty space, completely unaware that predators stalked them from dimensions they couldn't perceive. "Those cargo haulers are carrying enough ammunition to level a small planet," reported her tactical officer, studying the energy signatures bleeding through from normal space. "Then we'll make sure it never reaches their front lines," Cho replied, grimly. "Target their cargo holds. We take their supplies and leave them wondering how it happened." The Wraith began its approach, sliding through folded dimensions like a shark moving through deep ocean trenches. The Vorthak ships passed within a few hundred meters, their most advanced sensors detecting nothing but the background radiation of distant stars. They had no concept that death watched them from realities that existed beyond their understanding. "Initiating partial phase transition," announced the ship's dimensional engineer, his hands dancing across controls that manipulated the very fabric of space-time. "Hull integrity holding at dimensional level 4.7. The Wraith shimmered into partial existence, becoming solid enough to interact with normal matter while remaining invisible to conventional detection methods. Specialized boarding pods launched from concealed bays, their hulls designed to phase in and out of reality at will. Sergeant Tae-Hyung Lim led the boarding party as they materialized directly inside the Vorthak cargo ship's main hold. The veteran soldier had trained for years to fight in environments where physics operated by rules that would drive normal people insane. His team moved with practiced precision, each member equipped with weapons and equipment that existed partially. Outside three-dimensional space. "Remember, we're ghosts until the job is done," he whispered through their phase-shifted communication system. "The moment they detect us, we lose our advantage." The human soldiers worked with supernatural efficiency, using dimensional manipulation technology to phase entire containers of supplies out of normal space and into their own storage dimensions. Weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, and equipment, worth millions of credits, simply ceased to exist from the Vorthak perspective. The alien crew, working just meters away behind sealed bulkheads, remained completely unaware that their cargo was being systematically stolen by enemies they couldn't see. Within 15 minutes, the cargo hold was empty. The boarding party vanished, back into folded space, leaving no trace of their presence except for the missing supplies that wouldn't be discovered for hours. Deep within a hidden facility carved into the heart of a dead asteroid, Dr. Hai-Jin Song monitored the operation through quantum-encrypted communication channels. The brilliant physicist had dedicated her life to pushing humanity beyond the boundaries of conventional science, and now her theoretical work was being tested in the crucible of interstellar warfare. "The Vorthak are three-dimensional thinkers," she explained to her research staff as they watched tactical displays showing the success of the raid. "Their entire civilization is built around concepts they can see, touch, and measure. They literally cannot conceive of threats existing in folded space-time." Her assistant, Dr. Young-Soo Kim, studied the energy readings from the field operation with fascination. "It's like watching someone try to fight their own shadow. They know something is happening, but they can't understand what they're actually fighting against." "Exactly," Song replied, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of seeing decades of theoretical work prove successful. "While they spent 3,000 years perfecting conventional warfare, we learned to step outside the game entirely. We're not just using better weapons, we're operating by rules they don't know exist." The ultimate proof of her theories came when Vorthak Third Fleet received orders to investigate a series of gravitational anomalies detected in the Vale Nebula sector. Admiral Texfar, commanding over 200 ships including several Dreadnought-class vessels, approached what his sensors indicated were natural space-time distortions. "Deploy reconnaissance probes," he ordered, studying the strange readings on his displays. "I want to know what's causing these gravitational fluctuations." The probes moved forward, their sensors scanning frequencies across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. They detected energy patterns that seemed to shift and dance just beyond the edge of measurement, gravitational fields that folded back on themselves in ways that violated known physics. Then the probes simply vanished. Not destroyed by weapon fire, not crushed by gravitational forces, they ceased to exist on every sensor array in the fleet. "Where did they go?" Texavar demanded. Before anyone could respond, space itself began to ripple around the fleet, like water disturbed by some massive presence moving beneath the surface. One by one, ships began disappearing from their formation. Not torn apart by explosions or consumed by energy beams, they faded from existence as if reality itself had decided they no longer belonged. Within 2 hours, the entire Third Fleet of the Vorthak Empire had vanished into dimensions their science couldn't measure, their crews taken prisoner by enemies they never saw. When the reports reached Crexton, the Grand Admiral felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of warfare, genuine fear. They weren't conquering a retreating enemy. They were being systematically hunted by ghosts that could strike from nowhere and disappear without leaving so much as a sensor shadow. The humans hadn't fled in terror as expected. They had evolved beyond the Vorthak's ability to fight them, becoming something that existed outside the normal rules of war itself. For the first time in 3,000 years of galactic dominance, the Vorthak Empire faced an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't defeat. The final Vorthak, a salt fleet gathered at the edge of Earth's solar system, like a swarm of metallic locusts preparing to devour the last harvest. 2,000 warships stretched across space in perfect battle formation, their hulls gleaming with the reflected light of Sul. It was the largest armada in galactic history, containing enough firepower to crack planets and boil away entire star systems. Grand Admiral Crexton stood on the bridge of his flagship Universe Crusher, his 4 amber eyes burning with the fury of 3 months of humiliation. Behind him, holographic displays showed the massive fleet in all its terrible glory. Dreadnought-class battleships the size of small moons floated alongside carrier vessels that launched swarms of fighter craft. Support ships carried enough ammunition to fight for decades, while specialized vessels housed weapons that could ignite the atmospheres of entire worlds. "Today, we finish the humans," Crexton announced to his assembled fleet commanders through the communication network that linked every ship in the armada. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, backed by 3,000 years of Vorthak dominance over the galaxy. The alien commanders responded with roars of approval that echoed through their respective bridges. Admiral Vexmore commanded the left flank with 400 ships. General Kraltex led the assault wave with 600 vessels designed for planetary bombardment. Each commander had sworn blood oaths to see humanity erased from existence. "Begin the final approach," Crexton ordered. "Nothing survives. No human colonies, no space stations, no refugee ships hiding in asteroid fields. We burn it all." The massive fleet began moving toward Earth, their engines creating a light show that could be seen from the outer planets. On the third planet from the Sun, emergency broadcasts warned the remaining population to seek shelter in deep underground bunkers. Humanity's few remaining defense platforms powered up their weapons, knowing they faced impossible odds. But something was wrong with the fabric of space itself. Commander Haewon Lee, now serving as tactical officer aboard a vessel that officially didn't exist, watched her dimensional sensors with growing excitement. "Admiral, we're detecting massive gravitational distortions building throughout the system. The enemy fleet is creating perfect conditions for our emergence." Admiral Dongwoo Kim nodded grimly from his command chair, studying displays that showed readings no other species in the galaxy could interpret. Around him, the bridge of the USS Blackstar hummed with energy that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The ship's very existence was a violation of everything the Vorthak understood about physics and engineering. "All systems report." "Ready, sir," announced Navigation Officer Sung-Min Kang, his hands moving across controls that manipulated space-time itself. "Dimensional engines at full power. Reality anchors are stable. We can emerge whenever you give the order." Kim looked around his bridge at officers who had trained for years to operate technology that shouldn't be possible. Chief Engineer Yoon Seo Han monitored reactor systems that drew power from parallel dimensions. Communications Officer Jin Woo Park maintained contact with human ships scattered across realities that the Vorthak couldn't perceive. "Signal all Phantom Fleet units," Kim ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy what humanity has become." Space above the Vorthak armada began to ripple like water disturbed by something massive moving beneath the surface. The alien fleet's sensors detected gravitational anomalies that made no sense according to their understanding of physics. Energy readings spiked across frequencies that shouldn't exist, while space-time itself seemed to twist and fold in impossible patterns. "What's causing these distortions?" Crexton demanded of his science officers, watching as his displays showed readings that violated every law of physics his species had discovered. "Unknown, sir," replied his chief scientist, studying sensor data that seemed to change even as he watched it. The gravitational fields are folding back on themselves. It's as if space is being turned inside out. Then reality tore open like fabric being ripped apart by invisible claws. The USS Blackstar emerged from dimensions beyond normal perception, its hull materializing from the spaces between atoms. The ship was beautiful and terrifying to behold, its geometry designed according to principles that existed outside three-dimensional space. Surfaces curved through dimensions that had no names, while the vessel's outline seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of observation. Looking directly at the Blackstar caused physical pain as organic brains struggled to process a shape that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Vorthak officers across the fleet cried out in anguish as their minds tried to make sense of something that shouldn't be possible. "Impossible," whispered Crexton, his scaled hide turning pale as he stared at the dimensional readings flooding his screens. "No ship can exist in multiple dimensions at once. The structural stresses alone would tear it apart. But the Blackstar was very real, and it wasn't alone." Around it, space continued tearing open as more ships emerged from folded reality. The Phantom Fleet that had been stalking Vorthak forces for months finally revealed itself in all its terrifying glory. Cruisers, destroyers, and fighters materialized from dimensions the enemy couldn't perceive, their hulls gleaming with energy that existed outside normal physics. Admiral Kim stood on the Blackstar's bridge, his weathered face showing no emotion, as he surveyed the Vorthak armada through viewing ports that looked out onto multiple realities simultaneously. Around him, his officers worked at stations that controlled weapons and systems beyond alien comprehension. "Open channels to all frequencies," Kim ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent months preparing for this moment. "Emergency bands, military channels, civilian networks. Let the entire galaxy hear this." Communications. Officer Jin Woo Park's fingers danced across his console, establishing connections that reached across star systems and penetrated the communication networks of dozens of species. Every alien civilization with the technology to receive transmissions would hear what came next. Kim's voice echoed across space, carried by signals that traveled through dimensions the Vorthak had never imagined. "I am Admiral Dongwoo Kim of the Earth Federation. For months you believed you were conquering empty space, claiming easy victories over abandoned colonies. You were wrong. We haven't been retreating. We've been preparing." The words struck the Vorthak fleet like a hammer blow. Across 2,000 ships' alien crews realized they had been fighting shadows, while the real enemy prepared for war, in dimensions they couldn't perceive. "While you celebrated your hollow conquests," Kim continued, "we were building something beyond your understanding. You rule three-dimensional space, but we have learned to fight from the spaces between realities." Weapons Officer Jae-Sung Park had been waiting for this moment, his hands poised over firing controls that existed partially outside normal space-time. "Target acquired, Admiral. The enemy flagship is locked in our dimensional targeting matrix." "Fire," Kim ordered simply. The Blackstar's main weapon discharged energy that traveled through folded space, bypassing normal physics entirely. The beam emerged from directions that didn't exist in three-dimensional space, striking the universe crusher from angles that should have been impossible. Crexton watched in horror as his flagship's shields, designed to stop planet-killing weapons, proved completely useless against attacks that simply ignored their existence. The energy beam passed through the defensive barriers as if they weren't there, striking the ship's hull with force that made the massive vessel shudder like a leaf in a storm. "Shields are down," screamed his tactical officer. "But that's impossible. The beam came from inside our defensive perimeter." "How?" Crexton roared, his four eyes blazing with rage and confusion. "How are they shooting through our shields?" The answer came as more dimensional weapons opened fire across the battlefield. Human ships that existed in multiple realities simultaneously launched attacks that struck from every direction at once. Vorthak vessels found themselves being hit by weapons that seemed to materialize inside their hulls, while their own return fire passed harmlessly through targets that weren't entirely present in normal space. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Vorthak Empire faced an enemy they couldn't fight using conventional warfare. The humans had evolved beyond the limitations that bound other species, becoming something that existed outside the normal rules of combat. The age of three-dimensional warfare was ending, and the galaxy would never be the same. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed, a conflict that redefined the very nature of warfare itself. The USS Blackstar moved through space like a living nightmare, its hull phasing in and out of solid matter, as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions to be ignored at will. Admiral Dong-Woo Kim stood on the bridge, watching tactical displays that showed the Vorthak fleet in complete chaos. Around him, his officers operated systems that bent reality to their will, demonstrating humanity's mastery over forces that other species couldn't even comprehend. "Target the command cluster," Kim ordered, his voice calm despite the magnitude of the battle raging around them. "Show them what happens when you threaten Earth." The Blackstar's hull began to shimmer, becoming translucent as it prepared to phase directly through the enemy formation. Vorthak gunners opened fire with everything they had, launching plasma bolts and missile salvos that could level mountains. But their weapons passed harmlessly through the human ship as if it were made of smoke and starlight. "Impossible!" screamed a Vorthak gunnery officer aboard the Universe Crusher. "Our weapons are passing right through their hull," Captain Woojin Park commanded Strike Squadron Alpha from the cockpit of his dimensional fighter, a sleek craft that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Behind him flew pilots Young-Soo Lee and Narration, two of humanity's best who had trained for years to fight in folded spacetime. "Enemy destroyers, bearing 27 Mark IV, Park called out over the squadron channel. "Let's show them how." We danced between dimensions. The human fighters dove toward the Vorthak formation, their hulls flickering in and out of visible space. They struck from impossible angles, appearing above enemy ships before diving down through solid hulls to attack. Critical systems from within. Vorthak point defense weapons tracked targets that seemed to exist in multiple locations at once, their computer systems overloading as they tried to process movement through dimensions they couldn't measure. Young-Soo Lee's fighter materialized inside a Vorthak cruiser's engine room, his weapons firing at the reactor core before he phased back into folded space. The alien vessel exploded in a brilliant fireball, its crew never understanding how an enemy ship had appeared inside their most heavily protected compartments. "This is Alpha 7, Narration reported, her fighter dancing between the dimensions. As enemy fire passed harmlessly around her. "Direct hit on target 3. Enemy vessel is breaking apart." Across the battlefield, Vorthak commanders watched their fleets being systematically destroyed by enemies they couldn't see coming. Their most advanced sensors showed human ships appearing and disappearing like ghosts, striking from directions that didn't exist in normal space. "Their weapons pass right through our hulls," reported a panicked Vorthak tactical officer, his voice breaking with terror as he watched his readings. "Our armor is useless. They're shooting us from inside our own ships." The explanation came from Chief Engineer Min-Ho Seo, who was monitoring the dimensional drives aboard the human vessel, Phantom. He spoke to his engineering team through communication channels that existed in folded spacetime, his words reaching them across multiple dimensions. "That's because we're not entirely in their dimension," he explained, his hands moving across, controls that manipulated the fabric of reality itself. "We exist in the spaces between normal spacetime. Their weapons can only affect targets that exist in three-dimensional space, but we're operating in 4, 5, and 6 dimensions simultaneously. The Vorthak fleet found itself fighting an enemy that had transcended the normal rules of combat. Their plasma cannons and missile systems were designed to destroy targets that existed in 3-dimensional space, but the human ships flickered between realities like living shadows. Energy beams that could crack planets passed harmlessly through. Hulls that weren't entirely present in normal reality. Grand Admiral Crexton watched his mighty armada being torn apart by forces he couldn't understand. Ships that had conquered entire star systems were being destroyed by weapons that struck from impossible directions. His flagship's shields, designed to withstand direct hits from stellar mass weapons, proved completely useless against attacks. That simply bypassed them entirely. "How is this possible?" he roared at his science officers, his 4 eyes blazing with frustrated rage. "How can they attack us from inside our own ships?" But his officers had no answers. Their understanding of physics, perfected over 3,000 years of galactic conquest, had suddenly become obsolete. They were fighting an enemy that had evolved beyond the limitations that bound every other species in the galaxy. The tide of battle turned decisively when human reinforcements began emerging from folded space all around the Vorthak fleet. Ships that had been presumed destroyed during the months of guerrilla warfare materialized from dimensions the aliens couldn't perceive. The entire human fleet, thought to be scattered or eliminated, revealed itself in all its terrible glory. As Vorthak surrender signals began flooding subspace channels, Admiral Dongwoo Kim opened communications to address not just the enemy fleet, but the entire galaxy. His words were transmitted across every frequency, reaching alien civilizations throughout known space. "I am Admiral Kim of the Earth Federation." His voice echoed across the stars, carried by signals that traveled through dimensions beyond normal perception. "For 3,000 years you have ruled through fear and superior firepower. But while you perfected the art of war in 3 dimensions, we learned to fight in 4, 5, and beyond." His words struck terror into the hearts of alien commanders, who had spent their lives believing that conventional warfare was the ultimate expression of military power. They watched their screens showing human ships that existed in multiple realities, weapons that fired through folded space, and defensive systems that operated according to principles they couldn't comprehend. "We didn't seek this conflict," Kim continued, "but we will end it. No longer will any species live in fear of conquest. No longer will the strong prey upon the weak simply because they possess superior conventional weapons." On Earth, Dr. Haya Jin Song watched the battle unfold from her hidden laboratory, monitoring readings that confirmed everything she had theorized about dimensional warfare. The brilliant physicist had dedicated her life to pushing humanity beyond the boundaries of normal physics, and now her work was reshaping the balance of power throughout the galaxy. "Look at these readings," she said to her research team, pointing at displays that showed energy patterns existing across multiple dimensions. "We've transcended the limitations that bound every other species. We're not just using better weapons, we've evolved into something that exists beyond their ability to fight." The Vorthak Empire, rulers of the galaxy for millennia, found themselves kneeling before a species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. Their mighty fleets, which had conquered dozens of civilizations, were reduced to burning wreckage floating in the void. The age of 3-dimensional warfare was over, ended by a species that had learned to fight from realms beyond conventional understanding. As the last Vorthak ships powered down their weapons in surrender, Admiral Kim issued his final proclamation. "The USS Blackstar and her sister ships will patrol the galaxy, ensuring peace through our mastery of the impossible. Let this be a lesson to any who would threaten the innocent. We are the guardians now." The galaxy would remember this day forever. The day when humanity revealed they had been fighting a war in dimensions their enemies couldn't even perceive. The day when the laws of physics themselves became weapons in the hands of a species that refused to accept limitations. From the burning remains of the Vorthak fleet to the farthest reaches of known space, one truth echoed across the stars. The humans had become something greater than anyone could have imagined. They were no longer bound by the rules that governed other species. They had evolved into guardians of a new era, protectors of peace through power that transcended reality itself. The age of fear was over. The age of humanity had begun. The end.